Just give me a minute. Go ahead.
Okay. So, hey everyone, welcome to the final series or final week and session 8. And in this session, we're going to talk about the project organization, the best practices that you should be following in all your projects, and the UiPath implementation methodology, which is like a generic methodology that's going to work for all your automation projects. So it's not going to be specific to any project that you're working on, but it's going to actually cover all the general aspects, all the best practices, and would give you a high level idea of how an enterprise level project works, what are the stages in it, what are the roles in it, and all such information. So today, me along with Mukesh are going to walk you through these two topics. So this is what our agenda looks like. We would be walking you through the workflow layout, giving you a high-level overview of what are the workflow layout and how would you choose one of the workflow layout out of the 3 available. The second would be organizing projects, what you should be taking care when you're organizing any of your project. What are the best practices for project organization? That's the topic that we're going to cover under project organization. And then from implementation methodology, we would give you an overview of what the methodology is, what are the models under that methodology. So there are basically 4 models. And whichever organization you're working with or you're going to work with is going to follow one of these models to implement any of the automation projects. Then we would talk about stages in implementation methodology, which is going to give you an idea of how the project starts, and then all the stages in between, and finally the end phase of the project. Then Mukesh is going to give a demo of best practices that you should be following, things that you should take care when you are developing a project and all such stuff. For questions and answers, we can take up the question at the end, as well as Andres is available at the chat support. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop in your questions in the chat. So first up, we have UiPath workflow layout. So as I mentioned, so you are always going to choose one of these 3 layouts, basically, which is sequence, flowchart, and state machines in the table below. So workflow layout refers to the different types of workflow design or structures that can be used to automate anything that you're doing. So whether any business process that you're automating is going to follow either the sequence structure or is going to follow either the flowchart structure or is going to follow the state machine. Now, depending on the description or the type of processes you're automating, you're going to pick one of these. So sequence, you're always going to pick up when it's a linear workflow where activities are executed one after the other. So it is best suited for simple step-by-step automation, which is like easy to follow. So there are no branching. It goes like in an order, one after the other. And that's when you would go with the sequence layout. Example of it could be you extracting the data from an Excel file and entering it into a web form, or you're filling the web form onto the screen and stuff like that. The second is flowchart. Now, as the name suggests itself, whenever you have a visual workflow that involves branching, like if this has happened, go to this branch. If this has happened, go to the other branch. So whenever there is a decision making and branching involved, that's when you would go with a flowchart. It is best suited for complex processes that involves like multiple conditions. For example, if the amount of something is less than 100, then you want to go to some other portion. And if it's greater than 100, then you want to go to a different branch. So such logics would fall under flowchart. The third and the last is state machines. It's a little complex than the sequence and the flowchart, but it's the best when you have a dynamic event-driven transition between states. And it's best for long-running rule-based processes that have like multiple decision points. So if you have a really complex project that has to go through different states and that transition from to different states is event driven or has a lot of decision points in between, that's when you go with state machines. And you would see that a lot of enterprise project would be following mostly state machines. So there is also a built-in framework or a template by UiPath, which is called Robotics Enterprise Framework. A lot or some of your enterprise projects are going to follow that particular framework. Now, you can definitely go and modify the existing framework, but the concept is that there are state machines. There can be one state, two state, or n number of states. And then based on your process needs, you just, modify the states to go from one state to other, or retry, or like go to that state, same state again, and stuff like that. Now, moving from one state to other is actually transition, and then you decide what's the logic that you would want to put when it is transitioning to the other state. For example, there can be a customer support ticket, right? And our ticket can be in multiple states. It can be in open, it can be in progress, it can be in resolved, it can be in escalated state. So all these transition that is happening to different states would happen with state machines. So as I mentioned, it's best for long running and interactive workflows. So based on your need of the project, you're going to either pick sequence, if it's a linear process, you're going to go with flowchart, if it's a conditional flow with branching, and you can go with state machines if it's a dynamic event-driven transition between states. And I'm going to show the example of all the three layouts and how do they look and how do they work. So we're going to cover that shortly. Next up, we have organizing projects. Now, there are multiple ways or multiple factors that you might have to factor when you want to split or organize your workflows. But at least 3 of the factors among the 4 that is stated on the screen should always be considered, or it's good to consider when you're breaking down. So breaking.
Yeah, please make sure you guys are on mute. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah. So at least 3 of the factors you should be considering when you're breaking down your projects. And it's called, so when you say that you want to break down your project, it's actually called that you're making modules. So you're making sure that your project is modular. It has logical breaks. So every logical point or every logical chunk of the project is different module. So that way it is very easy to understand and it's easy to maintain that project. So the criteria can be the application that is being automated. So suppose if you have 2 applications that you're interacting with, say, Amazon, and you're interacting with another website. So you would want to make sure that they both are different workflows and you have not put all the configuration in one of the workflows, because that's just a logical separation. That when you're interacting with Excel or when you're doing the data manipulation in the Excel, you have a separate workflow. But when you're automating the Amazon, you have kept a separate workflow for it. The second is the purpose of a certain operation. For example, login, pre-processing, reading a document using OCR, filling in a template, and so on. So for example, let's take the same example of Amazon, right? Now, if you're automating that process to place an order, the best logical break of the process could be that you have a login workflow, you have a workflow to search for an order, and you have a workflow to place the order. So 3 different purposes. One is logging, one is searching for the order, and third is placing the order. And you've kept them in 3 different workflows. And that's how you would organize your project the best way. Then third is complexity of each workflow. Now, if suppose I am placing an order and it's like a very complex process that includes payment, adding the address, adding your credit card number and stuff like that, right? And it's a very complex and long process. You can still break that workflow into 2 pieces. One could be taking care of the addresses and everything, and the second could be payment. So depending on how complex your workflow is, you have still broken it down further into 2 workflows or 3 workflows. And last but not the least is workflow reusability in other projects. So if the payment portion of my workflow, I would want to reutilize at multiple places, then it's for the best that I separate it from the place an order workflow. Because I'm going to utilize the payment for other stuff as well, that I'm going to utilize the payment to also do the payment on other websites. So depending on one of these criterias or three of these criterias, you would break down your projects. And breaking down an automation process into smaller workflows would definitely ensure speed of development and reliability by allowing independent testing of components. So you would be able to test it better, you would be able to reuse it better, you would be able to collaborate with your team better because you're going to send that independent workflow to your team also if they want to reuse that. So you should definitely be taking care of three of these things out of the four to make sure that your project is well organized and it's modular. Always in the enterprise project, you would definitely have to break down your workflows into different modules. It cannot all be written in just main.xaml, right? And when you're working on an enterprise project or a real-time project, the question is not that if they should be broken down, but it's always like, how would you break down? And that's when you have to look at these criterias, and these criterias would guide you through how would you break down the process. So that's about organizing the projects and the things that you should be taking care when you're breaking down your projects. Now, second is some best practices for project organization. First is picking up a suitable layout for your project, which means one among the three. You pick sequence, you pick flowchart, you pick state machines. Now, within one project, you can also have combination of these layouts. You can have sequence and flowchart within the same project. You can have sequence and state machines within the same project. And that entirely depends on the nature of the process you're automating. The second is organizing projects into smaller workflows, which is separating it logically, making it modular. Third is using exception handling to capture and manage errors, always making sure that our automation does not lead to an abrupt end, whereas the end of the execution is really smooth and it's also giving you an idea of what the error really was. Handling the credentials carefully. We should never be hard coding the credentials or storing the credentials in the Excel sheet or anywhere where it could be read, right? The best way is that you store it in some vault, or you can store it in orchestrator assets where the credentials are stored in an encrypted format, right? Nobody can just go and read your password there. Make your workflows readable, making sure that you're giving proper comments and annotations to your workflows so that a third person can also understand what you have done. And keeping your automation clean. And Mukesh is going to give you a demo of some of these best practices and some other best practices as well, which are not listed here. So stay tuned till then. Now comes implementation methodology overview. So UiPath basically has devised an automation implementation methodology, which would provide a common roadmap for implementation teams all across. So it's not specific to any project, it is applicable to all the automation projects. Now, depending on the organization's program maturity, right? How mature your organization is in terms of automation, whether it's an early adopter or whether it's already an expert in that field, right? Everybody, not depending on the maturity, everybody would actually follow this implementation methodology because initially, when you're implementing a new automation project, there can be a lot of difficulties. But when you follow this methodology, it would ensure quality, it would ensure that whatever you're delivering is faster and it's more reliable, and there are smooth and quick handover from one team to other. So the implementation methodology ensures versatility, it ensures flexibility, and it ensures relevance, which means you're very much relevant to like what you're automating. The automation is scalable and flexible. And now all of this is combined into 4 different models that we are going to talk about shortly. So there is model 1, model 2, model 3, model 4. And any organization you pick is going to fall on one of these models or combination of these models. And then we have customer and the implementation team at the end. And they together come into one of these models or a combination, which is like a hybrid model, wherein you can combine model 1 or model 4 or model 2 and model 3. But all of this wouldn't make any sense until we know what really each model is. So for now, in terms of overview, the methodology would give you the methods and process that you should be following, and it is designed to exhibit flexibility, relevance, and versatility across various scenarios, implementing automation projects with UiPath. Now, these are 4 models that we talked in the previous slide. The first model that you see is the self-sufficient organization model. Now, in this scenario, inside the same enterprise or inside the same organization, there is a department that is taking the role of the client, and there is another department to which I am going to seek an automation service from. So there are 2 teams inside the same organization. One team that is the center of excellence for automation, and the other team who is acting as the client. So I'm going within my organization to ask another team to give me the UiPath expertise and capacity to implement the automation through an implementation team. So in the previous slide, what we saw that there was customer and there was implementation team, and both of them belong to the same organization. And that's the first model. So the key role is the client, which is the internal department requesting the automation center of excellence, which is going to provide UiPath expertise and would oversee the implementation, and the implementation team that is actually going to work on the automation project and deliver it. It's always best for the organization with an established automation center of excellence and internal resources for automation execution. And so the name is self-sufficient organization. Whatever you need to build your automation lies within your organization. The second model is external partner-driven model. Now, in this model, the organization lacks internal automation expertise. So if they want to get something automated, or if they want automation services, they have to go and seek that service outside their organization. So second model involves an organization looking to automate its business process using UiPath, but assuming only the role of the client. So if I am working in an organization, or if I'm organization 1 and I do not have any team with me, so I would go in the market and seek for somebody who can provide me with that service. And that's external partner. So I'm going to partner with someone externally for me to be able to meet my automation needs. So the organization turns into an external automation service provider, which can provide the required expertise and capacity through an implementation team. It's always best for organization looking to automate processes, but without internal expertise. The third model is UiPath-driven model. Now, in this model, the organization directly obtains both the licenses and implementation services from UiPath professional services. So if the organization is directly reaching out to UiPath to ask for the licenses as well as the services, which means I'm going to ask the UiPath professional services team to also help me in building the automation, like acting as my implementation team as well. That's the third model. And it is always preferable for organization who wants to work directly with UiPath and does not want any external vendor in between. That's the third model. The last model is, and that's the model in which most of the organizations fall, it's the hybrid model. In this case, an organization, when they're like really serious about their transformation goal and they want to go like all automated, no manual effort required for mundane work, what they do is, as part of extensive business automation program, they adopt the hybrid model. Now in this, getting both UiPath capacity and an external partner to fulfill diverse implementation need. That's what the hybrid model organization do. Because as companies, when they advance in their automation journey, they typically tend to like develop some internal expertise also to do some small work. So I am reaching out to an external partner to get like 5 processes automated, right? But I also want to have some internal expertise to be able to maintain that project internally. So that's the hybrid model. The client would be organization driving the automation transformation, and then it would be a combination of UiPath and some external vendor or partner in between. And I'm going to use both their expertise to be able to deliver what I need. So organization with multiple projects and complex automation program, they would require both internal and external resource to be able to implement or achieve their automation needs. So these are the four models. Either you do all in-house, which is the self-sufficient model. The second is wherein you go to an external partner. The third is where you would reach directly to UiPath for your services. And the fourth is a combination of both UiPath and external partners. So any automation that you would do is going to fall in one of these methodology models. Now comes what are the stages when you pick up any project. So if you start any automation project, it is going to go through various stages. In an enterprise solution or in an enterprise automation program, these stages are really important. People who take a role in these stages and what are the actions that they're supposed to perform in any stages is very crucial to ensure that your automation is successful as well as it is up to the mark, like it has really nice quality. The QA has been done properly, it has been deployed properly, and it tick marks all the best practices being followed. So for that, your automation has to follow a structured approach to ensure successful deployment. Now, these are the key areas or key stages. The roles involved in those stages are mentioned. Roles as in who are the people who is going to be part of that particular stage and their key responsibility in that particular stage. First is the kickoff. So that's like the informal start of the project. So whenever there's an automation opportunity with a good potential, we would grab that opportunity, of course. And that's the first stage in the implementation process, and that's called kickoff. The key people involved in this stage is the solution architect, the project manager, and the infrastructure engineer. Now, the purpose of this stage is to lay out and align with the client team on the expectations of the project. So you lay out what are the expectations so that the expectations are set right and straight. You conduct RPA readiness discussion to make sure that the client's environment is ready to be adopted or ready to take on the RPA. You review and approve the statement of work. So when there are multiple entities involved, you would always prepare a statement of work. It's a document that you prepare. In that document, you list on a very high level things that you would be taking care in the process or in the project, things that are in scope and out of the scope. So it's like a high level outlining what would you do in this project, and setting up communication cadence and initiate issue tracking. So whenever there is any escalation, any issue that needs to be done during the project, for that, there's a communication cadence set up that who has to be reached first, then what's the escalation path, and to how, so where the escalation path goes up to. So you would escalate to project manager and then to another PM and then maybe to the project sponsor. So that's the communication cadence and escalation path that you set up at the very initial stage of the project, which is called kickoff. So at this stage, you would also do an early examination of the client's environment. And infrastructure should be initiated. And that's the whole reason why you would have an infrastructure engineer in this phase. And they would answer very basic questions as well. Now, second is business case and technical validation. Now, roles involved here would be a solution architect, a project manager. And now, since the infra initiation has been done, we would have a BA here because we would want to validate the business case. So BA is going to validate the business case and solution architect is going to do the technical validation. And project manager would oversee to make sure all the things are met and met on time. So we would start with assessing automation feasibility, and that is something that the BA would start doing. the BA would assess the automation feasibility and complexity of the process, and the solution architect would check onto the technical dependencies. The PM would validate the timelines, BA would do cost benefit analysis and business case, and ensuring alignment with contractual expectations. That is something that the PM is going to do. So during this particular phase, the potential automation would be assessed for their business value and complexity. And it is also to validate the timeline. So you're going to say that, oh, I'm going to take 5 months to deliver the project or 6 months to deliver the project. These many resources I'm going to put on the project. These are the things that I would require to make sure that I'm able to complete the project. You would calculate the return on investment to let the stakeholders know that, this is the benefit in terms of cost that you would get if you implement the process. So that's the second stage. The third stage is the process analysis. And in this, you would have the solution architect, project manager, and business analyst. Here, you're going to document the current and the future state in a document that's called PDD, which is the process definition document. You would also finalize the process flow and the UAT plan on a very high level. So the business analyst and the solution architect, they would work together to analyze the chosen process on how currently it is and how it would look like after it has been automated. And that's called the to-be process. Now, using this analysis and based on the complexity of the process, they would determine that what can be automated and to what extent it can be automated. And if there is any change in the process or little reverse engineering involved to make sure that it's end-to-end automated, all that would be done during the process analysis phase. The fourth phase is the solution design, in which the solution architect, along with the automation developer, is going to develop the technical design into a document that is called SDD or TDD. They are used interchangeably. So SDD is solution design document and TDD is technical design document. It's one and the same thing. Some people use SDD and some people use or call it as TDD. And in this, you would map automation modules and application access requirement that you would want access to SharePoint, you would want access to shared drive, you would want to have Outlook, and whatever application you're using, you would want to make sure that all the access requirements are met. You would plan technical testing, including system integration. So if multiple systems are communicating with each other, you would want to make sure that you're planning all of that out and you are planning how are you going to do the testing. Now, the fifth is development and testing. The roles involved here is the solution architect, project manager, and automation developer. And that's when you start the actual work. So based on the two document, which is the PDD and the SDD, you would now start configuring the actual automation. When I say testing, it would include the unit, functional, and system integration testing that would be done by the automation developers. And that's all the more reason that you should have your workflows very modular so that you can perform unit testing. And then you would execute technical testing, do code reviews with your team lead or with the solution architect to make sure you're following all the best practices. And that's the fifth stage. The next stage is user acceptance testing, and the roles involved here would be a solution architect, a business analyst who knows the business requirement in and out, a project manager, and the automation developer. Now, here is when you would hand it over to the end user. The end user would conduct UAT in coordination with the implementation team, which is the automation developer and the solution architect, on the UAT plan that was created earlier and approved, and the bot in the pre-production environment. Now, that is where you would put your pre-production robots to run in an environment that is very similar to the production, but is not production. And you would make sure that it runs on the happy path, on the negative path, and you would ensure that the automation is performing upon all agreed requirements. And if there are any deviation, then you're actually documenting it somewhere or creating a bug for it so that it can be fixed. Now, once you have got a UAT sign-off, wherein the client says all good to go to production, is when you proceed with the deployment. The seventh stage actually is a combination of deployment and hypercare. And the roles involved here is a solution architect, a project manager, and an automation developer. Now, in the deployment stage, first let's talk about the deployment. In the deployment stage, it's like the final stage in which all the packages, libraries, and assets you have migrated to the production environment. And then now they're set to run with the production robot in the actual environment. So it should have access to all the applications there, whatever applications are in scope. That's something that you do like a pre-production check to make sure that the run in the production environment is pretty smooth. Once you have deployed is when the hypercare stage kicks in. Now, the hypercare stage is like it's a time of increased monitoring where you're very actively and closely monitoring the process that is running in production. And if there are any issues, you're quickly identifying and addressing those issues to make the process that you've just deployed stable in the production environment. And the entire goal of the hypercare phase is to ensure that the new release or the new deployment that you've done is stable and it is functioning as expected. And if there comes any issue, you would just quickly, promptly fix those issues. And this is the stage when you would also start the KT, which is called the knowledge transfer for long-term maintenance. The last phase is the project closure. And that's where everyone comes together, the solution architect, project manager, business analyst, infrastructure engineer, automation developers, and the client team. Here, you're ensuring that all the deliverables meet as per the contractual obligation, whatever was stated in the contract or the SOW, you're meeting everything. You've done all the handover, you've taken sign off on every stage, and that's the final financial closure and sign off that you've delivered what needs to be. And then there can come you can say a support model, right? Wherein you're also maintaining the process for quite some time. And it depends on like project to project. So some project, when they go into deployment, you're also supposed to like maintain it for an year or so, or sometimes you would just hand it over to the client and then they would take care of the maintenance. So these are the 8 stages. No matter what process you pick up, it's going to follow these 8 stages. It should follow for you to make sure that you're following the automation methodology and you're ticking everything that needs to be. Now, with that, we would put a hold on to the theory knowledge. And now I'm going to switch my screen to Studio to show you the 3 workflow layouts. And why would you choose one over the other, or in what scenarios you should be choosing one over the other. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen or like switch my screen to the Studio. Okay. I hope the Studio on my screen is visible.
Yes, Anmol, yeah.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so the first is the sequence. Now you can come here and from here you would choose, you can choose sequence as one of the layout. And this is what it would look like, a plain this thing. And now the workflows that you want to execute like one after the other. Suppose you're assigning something and then you're doing something else. For example, let me put some data table activities. Now you're building a data table or you're adding some row in it or adding a column in it. So if you look over here, it's like a linear sequence of event that is being performed. And that's when you would choose a sequence in this scenario, right? So if you have to do some data manipulation, if you have to do something one after the other with no decision in between is when you would choose a sequence. Now, this is a sequence project that I've created here. By just the look of it, all the activities are like one after the other, and there is no condition required at all in between. That's when the sequence is the best choice. So what this particular process would do, it would generate a sales report, right? So if I just quickly run it, it would collect information from 5 different Excels and then would prepare one Excel giving you just the report, right? So it is auditing the Excel file, looping over it, writing something, formatting the headers, and then would just create a file at the end. Over here, you can see it has opened in Excel, right? So once this executor has gone from my screen is when I open the file to show. So it is odd. So there are 5 files and it is looping across those files to generate one Excel at the end, right? So now the process stopped. Now if I go here to my sales results, which is here. So this is what it looks like. 26th March is the one that I would open. So it has consolidated the items here from a different Excel file and then created a pivot table here. And since all of these steps are like one after the other, I have picked up sequence to do so. Now, if I have a look at the flowchart would always have like decision making here, right? And to choose a flowchart from here only, you can go with flowchart and click on create. It would come with this thing telling you that this is the start point of the flowchart, right? And then you can have decisions from here. Now, what this would do is that you're assigning a random number here by doing new random dot next 1 to 999, which means it would generate random numbers between 1 and 999. And what this would do is it would ask you to enter a random number. If your number matches, if whatever you have guessed matches, then it would stop the process. If it doesn't match, then it would check that whether the number that you have guessed is too small or it's too big, and then it would take you back onto entering the number. So it would keep on running infinite number of times until you guess the number. Say, for example, if I run this thing, now I don't know what number it is guessing at the back end. So I'm going to just go with some guesswork. So I am entering, say, 56. So it would say it's too small, try again. So I'm going to go with 765 and it would come here this time. And then again, ask me for a number if this is not the correct number that I've guessed. It's too big, try again. What I can do here is I'm going to put a debugger here to actually know what the random number is. Now, if I put 456, it would again tell me that it's wrong. But here I can check that the random number is actually 320. Now this time I'm going to add 320. So let me put 320 as the number this time. And that would stop the process because I have guessed it correctly. Now, wherein you have a lot of if statements, if this has happened, do this, if the number is greater, do this, if the number is small, do this, if the number is equal, do this. That's when the best choice is that you go with a flow chart because it's also very easy to read. You can actually see it visually. So it's easy to read. I mean, you can, of course, put a lot of if-else statement here as well. Say, suppose I can put if here, inside that if I can put other if, inside that if I can also put an else if. The only problem with this type of approach is that it's going to create a lot of complexity within your workflow and it would be a little hard to read. Whereas if you do this thing with a flowchart, it would definitely be better to read, you will be able to like make changes quickly. So you should not go with this, but it's not a hard and fast rule that you cannot go with it. You can also, as I mentioned, right, you can pick a mix of the flowchart and sequence as well. Now, in terms of state machines, as I mentioned that there is a robotic process framework. So if you click on home, you'll see it here. It's for transactional business process and it follows all the best practice. So in this particular template, you will have all the exception handlings, taking screenshots, retries already configured for you because it's a template, right? You can go ahead and modify these template as well. But as part of this training, robotics enterprise framework is not covered in this training. It would be covered in the advanced level training, but this is one of the framework that would be extensively used for any of your automation projects. And here are the states that you would use in the robotics enterprise framework, you would use different states. So you can have, let me pick up a new sequence to show. Final state has to be only one. There can only be one final state that it is transitioning to. In between, you can have multiple states. And yeah, like this. So this is what it would look like. So these are different states, right? You can change the name. You can name it something else, demo state. And this is you providing it a name and some description for anyone to be able to identify that what it is. And then it would transition to different state. And these are the transitions. So you can give any name here. And inside the condition, you specify on what condition is it going to transit to any other state. And this is what a state machine looks like. With this, I would stop sharing and I would pass on to Mukesh to walk you through some of the best practices. And I'll be available on the chat to answer your questions. Thank you.
Okay, great. So thank you, Anmol, for covering the initial ones. And I will just open up my UiPath Studio and I'll share my screen. Tick, 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 tick. Okay. So you guys able to see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So this is our UiPath Studio, guys. And since you guys are doing this developer training, right? So it's important for you to follow the best practices, right? So first thing first, whenever you come to the UiPath Studio, right? What is the first thing we do? We go here and we create a new process, right? Which is this one, new process. Whenever we are creating any enterprise level project, you would never actually go here and create this process. You would be actually using something which is the robotics enterprise framework, because you want to create a process which is fit for large scale deployments. For small requirement, yes, it is absolutely fine to go with processes, but whenever it is enterprise project where you have a lot of transaction, you will start with the robotics enterprise framework. Okay, now for this demo, let's start with the process. Now a lot of the developers, when they start the process, they just name it as blank process, and here also blank process, right? So technically, if I just go and I create the process as blank process, I can create it. UiPath will accept it, right? UiPath is not going to say that I cannot create a blank process. What is the problem? The problem is when you actually deploy it to, let's say, the orchestrator. Let me just go to the staging of this, right? So when you deploy it to the orchestrator where you have a lot of processes, then it is difficult for you to identify which automation is doing what. So what is the best practice? The best practice is name the project carefully. So for example, today I'm going to say that this is a session on best practices. So I'll just go and I'll name it like this. The next best practice is always provide a description, right? So that when you deploy, it is there, right? And then this is your compatibility and VB language, and you just go and you create the automation. Okay, so that is one of the best practice which you should follow. Okay, Anmol mentioned about selecting the correct layout while designing the automation. So as a developer, you decide that now I want to do, I want to go with sequence, I want to go with flowchart and do all the steps, right? So let's say today I am writing an automation where I have to log into a portal, download some data and send an email, right? Now I can just, as a developer, go here, I can create a new sequence, and again, the same best practice. What do you want to do in this sequence, right? So let's say I want to log in, download, and something, right? I can just name it and I can create. Now, as a developer, I can write the complete code into this single XAML. So I can actually have code where I am logging in, right? Then I can actually go and write code to download the data, right? Nobody is stopping me and it will work, right? Because for UiPath, it is a code, and then maybe to send an email. Now, if you see this, if it is as a beginner, I'm writing the code. When I used to write the code, I used to write everything into a single XAML. I play, run, and it works as expected. But what is the problem here? The problem here is it is a tightly coupled piece of code, which means that Tomorrow, let's say you only have to test this part, the send email part. You cannot do that, right? Because you have written everything into a single XAML file. Tomorrow, you have to change the code only in the download part, which means that now as a developer, you have to touch this XAML, and while manipulating the download, you actually messed up something in the login and the send email, which you didn't expect or which you didn't like to do. So what does the best practice says? The best practice says is keep your functionality restricted to one XAML. So if I have to code it, I would create a new XAML and I'll call it a new sequence. I'll call it, let's say, login to SAP, assuming that I am today working on SAP, and I'll create all my code related to login SAP here. Next, I have to download the file from the SAP and do some processing. So I would like to call it as processing in SAP. I'll create it. And then maybe the third one is email send, right? So I'll just call it something like email send, and then write my individual code in these individual sequences. That gives me modularity. But now you might be thinking, Mukesh, how I'm going to club all of this together? That is where your concept of variables and arguments are coming in picture, right? So what I'll do, instead of now having all of this, I'll create one master sequence, which is called, let's say, master file for SAP. And I just drag and drop the files from here, which is like, first I want to log into the SAP, then I want to download, and after that I want to send an email. This is where you might have learned in your practices, that is an activity called invoke workflow, right? Now this looks much neater and cleaner, but now if you go back to your project, when you work for enterprise project, the XAML, as you keep on creating more and more XAML, this would be very huge. You would have a huge set of XAMLs which are in your project now. Now, again, into the project, you have an option. Just right click on it, add and create a folder. So I'm telling that whatever is related to SAP, I'll put it in a folder, and then all you have to do is just drag and drop this XAML into the SAP folder like this, and these guys will automatically adjust. Now if you'll see, this is much more cleaner, right? So this master SAP, I can go here. Processing in the SAP, I can again go and put it here, right? So now this is much more cleaner. Tomorrow in the same automation, I have one more component which is like to do with the database. So all I have to go here is add a new folder, and let's call it Oracle. Now, whatever I need to do with Oracle, I can just go here and write the things into the Oracle, and all the XAMLs will come here into Oracle. So I don't have to worry about this thing. And in the terms of best practices, this is called having a project which is maintainable and which is extendable, which means that now this also gives you a flexibility. Now there are, let's say, 5 developers in a company, and all 5 of them have to log into SAP. Now, since you have already written the code which is separate, which only have input and output argument, you can share this code to the other developer, which means that you can create a library out of it, you can create a reusable component out of it, and the other developer just have to reuse that component, and they do not have to rewrite the code again and again. So whenever you are writing a code or a functionality, think of always that whatever I am writing, is this automation or is this code? Can I utilize it in my other piece of automation? If the answer is yes, code it separately and try to build it as a reusable component. When I say reusable component, you can think it of these guys, which is like snippets, which UiPath has provided to us. So this is nothing but a reusable code. So UiPath says that in case you want to use a for each child, you want to iterate a file in a folder, you just drag and drop it here. See? And now I have this complete code which is available. I don't have to rewrite the code. Example of the code reusability. And that is why it is important for you to organize the files, right? I'll take a pause. If you guys understood and you like this concept, just comment maybe organize in the chat so that I understand that yes, you actually like this organization. And if no, then you can maybe chat, ping something else. Just comment maybe organize so that I understand that. Yes. Okay. Okay, great. Thank you guys. Okay. Now let me move to the next one. Okay. Now today I have to log into an application. As a developer, your path is different, right? When I am coding my files, right, I have kept my file, let's say, into my D colon coding and here in the Python, right? And I am reading my data from this file. So I'm just taking an example. So your automation was supposed to read an Excel, right? So I have used a read range activity. I am a developer. So I just went here and I just maybe use the read range workbook, right? And it will add the Excel dependencies again, right? And I am reading something. It can be a login, it can be credential, anything, right? Whichever you feel you are doing with the automation. Now, as a developer, I just go here and I point it to maybe any of the Excel if I would have, yes, vendor data, right? I'll just put it to the vendor data and it works as expected. I run it and it works perfectly. Now, as a developer, when I run this, this works in my environment. But when I give it to the customer, if you see the path, right? The customer does not know where is C user Mukesh Kala desktop. That is my path. Customer might have this into the different folder. And you go to the customer and like, okay, dear customer, tell me, where are you going to keep this file? And the customer is like, I don't know. Because I might use in a different machine, I might use in a different folder. That's where important thing is you need to make your automations configurable, which means that anything which you feel might change in future has to be made as configurable, which means that you should not touch the code to change that value. And to make the things configurable, you might recall it your orchestrator sessions where you have learned about assets, the easiest way to put on assets, right? But when we work on enterprise project, we have a lot of assets, 10, 20, 100, 1000. It is difficult for a developer to manage the assets in the orchestrator. On top of that, you need to have access to the orchestrator, right? That's where you have something which is the concept of config file, right? So I'll go to the home and you see here you have something which is called robotics enterprise framework, right? That is the reason I say that we start with this. So I create a framework called robotics enterprise framework, right? Which is a framework to build enterprise project. And by default, RE framework, when I say RE framework, it's robotic enterprise framework, gives you an option to manage all of this into a config file. So if you go to project in the data folder, maybe I'll just say it to others. So into this, here you see it is an Excel file. I can double click on it and this is an Excel file. Now here, this is a plain Excel file. You might have understood it is the name, it is the value. So today I am reading an Excel. So here in this, I would just say Excel path, right? And instead of now hard coding the data, I'll pass the Excel path here, which is like C colon users, whatever it is, right? Temp and all this. Now, tomorrow I have to log into a SAP portal. Into my development, the SAP URL is different. So I will also create something for SAP URL and I'll just pass the URL something like this, right? In my uh, when I'm doing the development, I am sending, let's say, email to Anmol, right? Because he's my colleague. So I'll say that success email is going to Anmol ID, right? So let's say Anmol at the rate of abcd.com, right? I'll just send her. Now, whenever there is an exception, today I'm sending that exception emails to Revati. Let's say she is managing my development support. But when I actually move to the customer environment, I don't know. So what I tell the customer is that, dear customer, when you try to run this project, make sure you do update all these values. And into your automations, you are just going to refer these things. So that way you have no dependencies on the things which might change in future. And this is where RE framework come in picture. So if I just give you a very high level, you might have not covered it. If you see, RE framework has written all the code for you, right? As a developer, you might have gone through the Excel automation. So if you see here, RE framework has written the logging, exception handling, it has read the sheet, everything is done for you. You don't have to do anything. You just have to use the config variable into your projects. It is just matter of doing one project in RE framework and it's super easy, right? So the whole idea here is if you use RE framework, well and good, absolutely awesome. But if you're not using RE framework because of any reason, it's a very small project, you have to make things configurable, which means that anything which you want to change, you should be able to change without changing the code. Now I have written this complete piece of code. I deployed it. Now, whenever there is a change, I just have to change this Excel, right? So that is the importance of configurations, right? I'll again take a pause, guys. If you have any question, put it on the chat. And if you understood the value of configuration, just comment configuration, right? And then meanwhile, I can just go prepare for the next one. Just comment on configuration, or if you have any question, feel free to put it on the chat. Awesome, Frank. Thank you. Cool. Great. Awesome. Let's move to the next one. Okay. Now, whenever as a developer we are coding, right? There are two types of logic. One is the business logic and one is the system logic. Okay, cool. So I have a question. I'll answer that. Does RE framework come with its own Excel config file? Yes, this is the one. It is a blank Excel file for you, which RE framework feels that these are the things which you are going to use. In case you want to change, you can change it, right? Okay, Anmol have already answered, right? Now, when it comes to the writing of the code, right? There are two kinds of code at a high level, which as a developer I'll write. One is the code, which is system logic, and other is something which is the business logic, right? Take an example. You are running a robot and the robot got into exception. Now, the exception was, let's say, object reference not set to an instance of an object. And now, as a business user, I have received an email from the robot saying that object reference not set to an instance of an object. I am absolutely a non-technical guy. I am a business guy. I understand my process, but what do I do with object reference not set to an instance of an object? That error is for the developer. So that is why whenever we code, we make sure that we separate the system logic and the business logic and we handle it carefully. So what happens in the real-time automation or implementation? The system logic is different. Any error which is coming from system is treated as a system exception. Any error which is coming as business is coming as a business exception. So instead of sending object reference not set to an instance of an object, we wrap that message into something which is called business exception, which you might have seen into the exception handling playlist. If not, just watch the exception handling videos on the academy and you would understand, right? So instead of sending object reference not set to an instance of an object, I tell the customer that the password which you have shared is incorrect, or I tell the customer the Excel file is not available at the desired location. I tell the customer the password of your portal is expired. I tell the customer the value which you have set has expired, right? So that message the customer is able to understand and he is able to take an action. All these technical errors goes back to the developer, right? Now again, a question you might be thinking, how as a developer I can do that? Answer to that is again this guy, which is the robotics enterprise framework, right? Which is again built on the concept of robotics enterprise framework, right? And if you'll see here, it's very simple, right? You have learned the state machines, right? So you would be able to understand. UiPath tells me that, first of all, Mukesh, I'm going to start here and I'll go and I'll read the configuration file, which is like that Excel file, whatever we saw. Now, if there is an error in the Excel file, there is no point in running the automation because the configurations are not loading. So RE framework says that if there is a system exception, I'll go and I'll end the process and I'll say that end the process and close all the application because there was an issue initializing my application. I was not able to read the config. But then if it was successful, then I will try to read the transaction data to run the process. And now when I am processing the data, then there can be three options. Either I would be successful, either I would fail. But when I fail, I may have system exception or I may have business exception. So if you see here, whenever there is a business exception or whenever there is a success, it goes to get the next transaction. Whenever there is a system exception, it goes to back to the initialization and retries that. But whenever there is a business exception, it goes to get the next transaction. Here, if you realize, UiPath RE framework has played it very intelligently. Whenever there was a system exception while processing the item, you see this arrow? This is going to initialization, which means that it is going to retry the items. What is a system exception? Your browser was not opening, there was a code error, there was something like delay, the portal failed to open, email server was not responding, all these kinds of issue. So RE frameworks thinks that, okay, I might retry and it might work. But when there is a business exception, no matter how much you retry, it's not going to work, right? If the password of the portal is incorrect, even if you retry 3 times, 4 times, and robot execute very fast within seconds, right? So there is no point on retrying. So business exceptions are not retried. As a developer, again, you have an option to modify this, all of that you can do, but this is how RE framework take care of it. So the whole idea here is your business logic should be separate, your system logic should be separate, and all these exceptions should be handled properly, right? Otherwise, what will happen if you club everything together? System exception goes to the developer, business exception goes to the developer, developer does not know, developer don't have access, right? So you are a developer, you are receiving an email saying that, hi Mr. Developer, uh, please reset the password of SAP, and you are like, guys, I am a developer, I don't know that, you can't do that, right? Or the other way around, the system, the admin is receiving an access, receiving an error saying that the selector is not found. He was like, I can't do that. So proper separation of business logic should be there whenever you write the code. Okay, let's move to the next one. Okay, logging, right? When we log information. Now the first question is, why do I log the information? Whenever you run this automation, right? Specifically, I'm talking about unattended automation, right? Unattended automation, which works when it's logged screen, you can schedule them. Now just imagine, right? There is a automation which is doing 100 steps. It is working in the background. All of a sudden, it got failed. Now you are supposed to debug. How would you know what is the automation doing, where it failed? I cannot do that, right? So for that, what developers do, developer use something which is called log message activity. So this is robotics enterprise framework. If I see the best practice of RE framework, you would see that they would have put logs, everything, right? So let me just open one of the XAMLs and you would see that they would have done the proper thing, right? See, log message activity, stop process was requested, I have got this error, right? So all these, whatever you see the log messages, they are getting added to the orchestrator, that the process started here, then it went here. Whatever action is the automation is doing, it is actually adding those details into the orchestrator. So whenever there is, let's say, a log message, you would see this one, that I have failed with this exception and all. And as a developer, it is one of the best practice to include logs into your process, so that whenever you try to debug and just looking at the logs, you would be able to understand that, okay, my automation went from step 1, step 2, step 3, and step 4 it got break. So you do not have to debug the complete process, you just debug the step 4. That's why logging is important. But now a question, right? The developer, the initial developers or the beginners, they try to put a lot of logs. So we don't have to overkill the process as well. So that's a mature decision which as a developer you have to take, that how much log and information I should log, right? I have seen in my experience as a senior developer slash lead, as a manager, right? People logging a lot of information which is not required. So for example, you are working for a banking client, okay? The bank data is highly sensitive, and you received an email from, let's say, a director of a bank, or maybe a very high customer, very high profile customer in a bank. You received an email, right? And as a developer, very friendly developer, you write a log that the process has started, I have received an email from xyz@bank.com. So what has happened? You have logged in the information which was confidential. And now that confidential information is available into Orchestrator. Orchestrator is a centralized repository. A lot of the people have access to it, right? So what is the best practice? Yes, we have to log information, but we have to take a decision that how much log should I put? The important thing is no logging of the sensitive slash confidential information. Let's say you're working for a healthcare project, right? And you are dealing with patient data, SSN number, their health card number. All these things I should never log. Yes, I should log like that. Okay, I have opened the portal, but I'm not going to log the URL of the portal. I can say that the login was successful, but I'm not going to put the user ID in the credential, right? So that is a decision you have to take, that I am logging information, but I am not logging the sensitive information. Okay, that's important for you. Again, I'll take a pause and just comment down maybe logs, LOGS logs, so that I understand that you guys got an idea that what is logging and why it is important. Cool. Thank you guys. Okay, let's move forward to the next one. Okay. I am a developer again. I am writing this code, right? It's Friday morning, it's Friday afternoon. I am in a hurry and I just forgot to save this and I just close this from here. Now, and I say no. I worked for a complete week and let's say I forgot to save this. The other bad part is, as of now, this code is saved in my, if I show the project folder, this is in my document C users Mukesh Kala. This is in my uh, my my C drive, right? Now what happens is I went to home, I kept my machine like this, and this machine got crashed, right? My complete OS maybe got corrupted. Now what happens is I lost all my project, all my code. Now what do I do? One thing which a lot of developers do as a mistake is that they keep copy of the code, version 1, version 2, version 3, version 4, version 5, version 6. They put date, they put it into different folders, C drive, D drive, E drive, but that's not a best practice. What is the best practice? The best practice is put your code into the source repository. If you see on the home at the top here, you see here you have something which is an option of team. So if you click on team, you would see that UiPath, as of now, I have just only enabled Git. UiPath provides you an option to add your code to the cloud repository slash remote repository. UiPath works with Git, SVN, and TFS. If I go to the settings, and if you see here manage sources, I just have maybe I think I forgot where it was. Okay, when you actually start it, yeah, in the tools, I guess, yes, here it is. In the plugins, right? I have only enabled Git, but depending on the company or whichever you are using, you have option to use SVN, you have option to use TFS, right? Git is a free and open source version. You can create your own version, put your code. If you are working in, let's say, an enterprise who is a Microsoft heavy customer, you would have access to TFS. Now, why this is important? This is important because all the code is merged back to the source repository and developer is having a no local copy. The other important thing is, let's say me and Anmol are working on the same project, right? Was having access to all the code because Anmol and me are working on the same project, right? Anmol wrote a very good code. The functionality was working as expected, right? My job was to just put a log message, but while I was putting a log message, I deleted some of the important code from Anmol's code and the functionality is broken. Now, what do? I go back to Anmol. Anmol spend time, she find the errors, and she reports me that this guy has deleted code, blah, 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 right? And then we try to fix the code. Takes a lot of time. You face reputation challenges, and it's not good for production. How does the Git and this repository help? What happens is whenever you upload the code to these remote repositories, Git, SVN, and TFS, it is creating a version 1, version 2, version 3, version 4. So now when I did that mistake of deleting the code, you can just go to the Git, right click on it and say compare. And Git is going to show you that where exactly which file and which line Mukesh actually deleted. And from the server, you can just right click and say restore. That's it. Within just 3 or 5 seconds, you would be able to get back to the actual version. It maintains every log. The other thing is when you have a wider team, let's say 10, 50, 20 members, all of them working on the same project, and somebody did something wrong. Now you have to find, right? You deleted, you deleted, you deleted. No need to do that. Just go to the source control repository and it maintains tracks of everything. That is why it is important for us to use the source repository. UiPath has Git, SVN, and TFS. Okay, take a pause. I'll take again a pause. I'll drink water. Meanwhile, if you understand the source repository, just maybe comment down source repository. So I understand that yes, you felt the importance of source repository. Okay, nice. Okay, now the other thing is whenever you write a code, right? If you see here, I was writing a code. I created a new sequence, create, and then I created a flowchart, create. I created this. I created a new sequence, and I created a lot of stuff, right? In that sequence, whenever you work, right, you create variables and arguments, right? So I went and today I have to create a variable and I have to store a name. What is the best thing a developer do? They name the variable as A. I have to store a age. They name the variable as B. I have to store the uh, country C. Will it work? The answer to that question is yes, because it's a variable. But is it the best practice? The answer to that question is no, right? How are you going to know what is this A variable is used? What is the best practice? The best practice is provide the variable name carefully. There are a lot of best practices. Enterprises have their own best practices guide when they give you. So one of the best practices is like, if I today have to store the first name, I will name the variable something like this. In the camel case, so it is readable. Str is the data type. I have to store the age, so maybe I'll call it as integer age and I'll change it to integer, right? This part is again optional, but let's say today I have to store the let's say country, so I can just say it would be string, so str underscore country. I'm reading an Excel. I am getting the data in the form of a data table, which is having insurance data. So I can say DT underscore insurance data, right? And then this is a data table. So I can just go and change it to data table, right? So that way, whenever now I am in my automation, I have to use the variable. I can just go and when I use the variable, use variable, I would see that what exactly this thing are meant, even with the variable data type. So this is one of the best practice to rename the variables properly. The same applies to the arguments as well. If I have to take input as a number, so I can just say in underscore number. If I have to give output argument as age, so I can just say out underscore age. So that way it would be easier for you to do that, right? Now, again, the different problems comes when we are working as a developer, right? We tend to create a lot of variables. And for you, it is good because you have written the code. Now you got a better offer. You move to a different project, a different team. Now there is a new developer who comes to you and he says that, oh my God, we have a lot of sequence here. What is the best practice? The best practice is if you're not using a variable, remove it. If you're not using an argument, remove it, right? Because you are unnecessarily confusing the developer and it's not a best practice. Previously, as a developer, I had to manually see which variable I am using, which I am not using, and all those stuff. As UiPath has become intelligent, at the top, you have something which is called remove unused. So in a matter of single click. So for example, if you see here, let me show you interesting stuff, right? So for example, out of these all variables, I am just using, let's say my name, and I am just using one variable, right? Others are not used. So I can go to the top and I say remove unused variables. Are you sure you want to remove unused variables? It will show you which are not used. I hit OK and boom, all the unused variables are gone. I'm not using these two arguments. Remove unused arguments, gone, right? That's it, right? The other thing about when you use the project, right? By default, UiPath add two dependency, but over a period of time, you keep on adding more and more dependencies to the project, right? Which makes the project bulky. And in the orchestrator, you have to again import that. You can go and remove unused dependency, import, screenshot, and all. When you should do this activity? When your complete project is done, it is ready to be deployed to orchestrator. You go here and you just run this exercise once, and it says that there are no unused dependencies because I'm using Excel and everything, right? So that's one of the best practice. But if you see here, I have a lot of, I would say, workflows which I am not using. So for example, this is a sequence where I created, but into my main sequence, I have not used that sequence, right? When I say main sequence, which means that this complete project is not using that workflow. So it would never get called, right? We create temp, we create test, a lot of XAMLs we create, right? You can just go here, remove unused, and you can just click on this guy, which is very workflows. And it will show you, see, Mukesh, you created sequence one state machine. I say, okay, and boom, all of that is cleared now, right? But do this when your functionality is working end to end, you are not using that, then you can clean this, right? There's a pretty handy feature which is called remove unused, and I think you will like it, right? I'll take a pause before then I have the last one. If you guys like this feature, because I personally use this a lot, right? Just comment maybe, let's say, remove unused, and then I'll show you the last one. Interesting. Remove unused. Cool. Great. So the last one for today in the interest of time, and I think we have covered, there are a lot of best practices when you actually go and create your actual project, you will have a lot of best practices, right? Now, whenever we are writing the code, we need to make sure that I am following the best practices. In companies, in enterprises, what people do is they set some kind of rules which the developer has to follow, like naming convention, the thing which Anmol was showing, right? Flowchart, sequence, config, hard coding, a lot of things. So if you'll see at the top, you have something which is called analyze the file, which means that the file which I'm working on, you analyze the file, and then you have a new thing which is called analyze the project. So this analyze project and this analyze file and this validate, and validate is just a validation, analyze is analyzing, right? So you would see here there is something which is called workflow analyzer, which means that whatever code I have written, I want a system to analyze my code. So UiPath has an inbuilt tool which is called workflow analyzer, which, as I am the admin of this and it is my community edition, I have access to everything. But let's say you join a company as a junior developer, you won't have access to change this, right? If you see here, these are all the kind of rules which are set by default. As an admin, I can check, uncheck all of this, right? And what happens is, before I just deploy, if I am not following any of the best practices, I can just go here and I say analyze the project. See, your organization requires your project to have an automation hub URL defined. It says that, Mukesh, your company has set up a rule that you need to have this automation hub URL. Now, as a developer, I said, okay, let's ignore it, right? But I cannot ignore it because if I try to publish that, right? See, because I have opened the config. So that is one part. I'm not sure if I have given the publishing right, but let's try to see that. Because I'm the admin, so I can ignore it, right? So, and then it again depends, right? What kind of error that was. I think it was analyze the project. It was oh, okay. So it was a warning here. See, this was a warning. That is why it was there. But let's say there is an error, then that error, it won't allow you to create it, right? So for example, I just create a variable called a. Don't know if I have that rule enabled or not. You need to check. Let's try to analyze it. Yes, see, it has again given me those warning. Minimum log messages, activity name is default, automation hub URL is missing, right? So all of this is configured as error. But if I just go here, it is like USG020. So as a developer, you don't have access to this. This is taken care by the admin. But what you can do is 020. Let's say you are an admin. As of now, it is coming as a warning. So the admin of your company can change it to error. What is the error one? Other one is 034. So warning, it is like, okay, I gave the developer a warning, he ignored. But now I change it to error. I say, okay, right? That is an organization policy which they have set. Now I try to publish it. Here it is, right? So as a developer, I cannot ignore that. I can ignore the warning, but if you have some strict policies which are set up by your company, which they usually do with the help of workflow analyzer, you are not able to deploy. So what you have to do is you have to fix those error and then do it, right? I am an admin, so I can suppress it, but for you, you have to work on that, right? And as a good practice, these are all the default things which UiPath has given to us, right? So whenever there is a warning which UiPath feels that is a best practice, try to not publish a project with any warnings or any errors. But if you work for a client or a customer, they are going to enforce this and you would not be able to deploy. So if you're not able to deploy, your work is not completed, right? So that's the use of workflow analyzer, and I hope you like that, right? So that was my last item for today, which was workflow analyzer. We are on time. If you like that, just comment down workflow analyzer, and that's it from my end. I can stop
Awesome.
my sharing.
Yeah, so Mukesh and Mal and Andres, thank you so much. This was such a great session. So many comments in the chat. Thanks for keeping up with that, Andres and Mal. And we're not done yet. So if you guys can just bear with me 5 more minutes, I'm going to do a Menti quiz. And because you've been with us the whole series, and this is the last day of this series, I do want you to know that you should be copying everything from chat. I just put the Menti information in the chat, and I'm going to pull up a screen here in a second. But I also want you to know that you really need to register for that career day. It's going to be great for you. If nothing else, you want to record it. So sign up for it, register for it. I think it's really important to make sure that we know that you're okay. And we want to make sure of that. So give me a second. I'm going to pull up my screen. So we're gonna have 3 winners today, you guys. So thanks for bearing with me. And I hope you guys are all logging in right now. You can use this QR code. I'm gonna give you like 30 seconds, but we really want high participation. These are good prizes today. Just so you know, I'm not gonna tell you what they are, but they're good.
Can we also participate?
Yeah,
Stupid question, but
sure.
yeah. But we will be
I
excluded
don't
from the
think so
winners, right?
because you know the answers. Yeah. Okay, so here we go. Okay, we have 21 players. I needed to get up to at least 25, you guys. These are good prizes. You'll enjoy them. Here we go. A few more people. No? Okay.
I'm sorry, I cannot get the code. Can I try to?
Yeah, do you need the code again? Do you need me to go back a slide? I don't know if I could do that.
Yeah, please.
I
No,
can
the
put
code
it
is
on
there
the
up on the top, 88618897.
Right here?
Yeah.
And it's also in the chat.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Can we?
Yeah. Yeah, I'll wait for you. Are you the crazy 8? Okay, I'm gonna wait like 20 more seconds, you guys. There we go, Santa. I love this. All right. So here we go. You have to answer fast to get more points. Arrange the implementation stages in the correct sequence. Is it solution design, process analyst, UAT development? Is it process analyst, solution design, development, UAT? Or do you do development first or process analyst first? Congratulations. That was quick. Okay, let's see who's in the running here. Hey, Sebastian, you're holding the top space here, but Dinko is right behind you. So let's see the next question. And I'll put these together. Great job. Again, you have to answer fast. Which of these is an output of the kickoff stage? Is it review the SOW, completed PDD, review the SDD, or completed UAT? That one tricked people a little bit. Okay, let's see. So the correct answer, you guys know, was the first one, right? Okay, so make sure. Okay, I think Dinko is moving up. Yep, and Panda's right behind him. Okay, and then we have the last question, I think. Question 3. Which workflow layout should be used when there's a clear succession of steps without any conditions? Is it flowchart, state machines, or sequence? Sequence. Good job. Okay, so let's see who the winners are. So we have, wow, everybody changed. So we have Abby, Raja Shekhar, and Dinko. So if you guys can all three, please put your email addresses in the chat for me. I'll grab those, but I need you to do that kind of quickly. And so remember, we have more fun on April 22nd. Make sure you guys all sign up. Thank you all for joining. This has been amazing. And just a great group all together. And again, I hope you guys have learned a lot out of this whole session. It's just been a lot of fun. So we really enjoy being here with you. So let me just get back to a few things. And with that, I'm just gonna, let's see here. Just stop the recording.